Hey, this is Subspace Transmissions. I'm Tyler.
And I'm Cam.
Cam, we're talking all about cliffhangers. Of course, we have the Star Trek Discovery cliffhanger, Will You Take My Hand? Fans still talking about this, and we had a lot of fun in the podcast this week because we debated which series had the best cliffhangers.
Right, and what do you think? What do you come down on?
Well, for me, it always has to be based on a lot of the characters' actions, whether those actions have consequences. So I'm not so driven by the plot mechanics.
Right.
And oftentimes we found that Star Trek Voyager, they left you on these kind of wham, bam, pow sort of moments.
Like Workforce.
Well, what exactly, Cam? Until you even mentioned on the podcast, I'd kind of forgotten what the Workforce cliffhanger was. What was it?
I've forgotten already. No, it's Chakotay on the run from security guards.
So it's like, whatever. And
Yeah.
same with Equinox. As much as I think that's a great two-part episode, the cliffhanger ends with an alien coming at Janeway. So it's not really based on any of her actions or her decisions. It's based completely on external forces. And I think oftentimes that was the thing that Voyager fell into, the trap that they fell into with their cliffhangers. Cam, tell me, though, what is a series that you think did the cliffhangers quite well?
I think Deep Space Nine did it fantastically well.
And is it the character stuff for you, or are there other things in there?
It's the characters for sure, because it has more of a serialized kind of feel, and because the characters feel deeper than they did on TNG or the original series.
That's why they call it Deep Space Nine.
That's why. Yeah. There's more of a sense that you're living with these characters, and so the changes they're going through just have more of an emotional impact. But to me, one of the big elements that makes a cliffhanger fantastic is a sense of mystery, where I can't wrap my head around where it could be going next. I have a specific idea as to what it will entail. Like we know, for example, at the end of Call to Arms, Sisko's reuniting with the fleet, and that there is going to be some attempt to take back Deep Space Nine. But we don't know how. We don't know what sort of machinations are going to have to be in place for this to happen, or what the characters back on the station are going to do, like Kira or Odo. But we know that we have a rough idea of where it's going, but we don't know how, and we can't wait to find out how it's going to happen.
The fascinating part, though, is that Deep Space Nine goes to the same well a couple times with regards to the fleet meeting up once again.
If it works.
If it works. And this, of course, is reference to Favor the Bold, and that's another cliffhanger that works for me, because you realize there's going to be some consequences to the decisions the characters have been making throughout this initial episode. So Deep Space Nine, there are other great stuff that we go into on the podcast as well. How do you think maybe TNG fares? Because I think it's very important here that, look, let's not mince any words. Best of Both Worlds, often considered to be the best cliffhanger in all of Star Trek.
Right.
And I think from there on, they kind of use that as a bit of a touchstone episode. And maybe they fell into the trap of kind of trying to top themselves, and I don't know if they could ever do that, for example.
What do you think the closest they ever came to topping it was?
To topping it.
Or not necessarily topping it, but to equaling it or coming close.
Okay, this is going to be such a lame example, but I'd have to say Descent.
You're really selling it. Descent? You know what? I agree with you.
Yeah, because the reason I say that it's a lame example is because, again, we're going back to that Borg well, but the thing is, we don't know what's going to happen with Data. We have the reappearance of Lore. This is all based on characters' decisions, where they find themselves now, character moments, and that's what I keep going back to. That's why Best of Both Worlds works so well, is because it's a Riker-centric episode, and it hinges on his decision to say fire, whether or not Locutus is destroyed and we never see Patrick Stewart again. I kind of think we knew where that was going, although back in the day, there were some rumors that maybe one Sir Patrick would not be returning to the series. So that kind of gave that sort of a meta narrative that a lot of fans were, I'm sure, gripped to their TV guides reading all about in the summer of '89.
Do you think TNG ever fell really short?
With regards to cliffhanger?
Yeah.
I would say yes, in that I found myself not excited by where we left Worf in Birthright Part 1, where he's being told he's not allowed to leave a prison camp. So he's stuck at the prison camp.
Right.
But guess what, Cam? I'm pretty sure the audience figured out that he'd be aboard the Enterprise by the end of that Part 2 episode.
Right, yeah.
What about you? Any shortcomings on the part of TNG?
I don't think it's a terrible cliffhanger, but I don't know that Redemption has the punch it should with the reveal of Sela.
Okay.
It's like, I think you could probably tell that was Nice Crosby's voice on that shadowy figure, like in A Mind's Eye, or I think there was another episode, right, leading into that. I think she'd shown up twice before. It's kind of like, okay, but there's Sela.
There is that WTF factor with regards to
it being a Romulan.
Yeah, why is she a Romulan now?
Yeah.
I don't understand this.
I don't know. Maybe it's because so much of that hinges on the fact that later down the road, I just find out Sela would just be a waste.
I know.
So it does lose a lot, you know. But
Cam, what do you think is like the biggest WTF moment among all the Star Trek cliffhangers that we've witnessed so far over the last, 52 years now?
yeah, I mean, it's got to be the space Nazi in 0 Hour, the Enterprise.
What was that, Cam?
The finale to the Xindi arc, and then, hello, surprise, we got space Nazis.
Well, the reason it was so weird is because 0 Hour was such a strong way to wrap up the whole Xindi arc.
Yeah.
And then they put space Nazis in there randomly for no reason. And so it means that nothing that we saw there hinges on what the characters did or even just like the plot
Right.
leading up to that. It was just random shock value, which...
It is so weird going from like the explosion of the Xindi ship, Archer outrunning, fireworks, cut to him like trapped by space Nazis on Earth.
In a tent?
It's so weird.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily...
He's like camping with space Nazis.
Camping, you say. Row, row, row your boat. No, I don't think... Take it isolated from the episode it's attached to. I don't think this is a terrible cliffhanger for, going into the next season or whatever, or the next episode. But attached to 0 Hour, it's kind of disastrous.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can't argue with that. Cam, let's talk a little bit about whether the cliffhanger in Will You Take My Hand from Star Trek Discovery's very first season, does this work for you on the level of what we've seen with other cliffhangers and what have worked throughout the other series?
It did for me, very much so. Like, there was a real sense of, like, the optimism of Star Trek coming back. A lot of fans complained this season that the show was very dark and not very Star Trek-y, or not true to, I guess, what they felt Roddenberry's ideals were.
Well, I bet you are not fans of cannibalism either. Very picky people.
Yeah, no kidding. But, sort of the reappearance of the Enterprise kind of right at the end of the Klingon War gives a real sense that, like, we're going to kind of try and recapture a bit of that spirit of wonder that the original series brought, as did, TNG in the series after.
For me, this is something that should not work for a nitpicky fan like me. In that it seems,
the king of nitpicky fans.
Exactly. Conscience of a king of nitpicky fans.
You're reciting Shakespeare in like a warehouse.
Yes. But because, look, it's not really based on the character moments of the Discovery cast. It's not based on any decisions they make. They're passive actors in all of this. It is
almost like the space Nazi in 0 Hour in that it is very much out of the blue.
It's out of the blue. It's more kind of those like WTF sort of moments. But I have to say the execution of this, everything from just the shot of the Enterprise, the hints of the registration that we saw coming over Bryce's console, and then I'll tell you the moment that sells it to me is just the music. When you hear those notes of the Alexander Courage score, I was sucked in, and I usually hate this kind of fan servicey stuff. I just find it to be so cheap, but man, I was a sucker all the way for this. And the fact of the matter is, I can't wait to see what they do with this in season 2, and I think that really tells you whether or not something's a good cliffhanger.
And it has that sense of mystery I talked about when I was talking about Deep Space Nine, in that we know that there's going to be a story that somehow involves the Enterprise, the original Enterprise, but we don't know what that story is. We don't know what it could entail. We don't know which characters from the Cage era are going to possibly show up. And so it has that excitement about it. We know the Enterprise is there, but what next?